Okay, so this is page 2 of the chapters 1 and 2, Great Gatsby, with the additional characters. Okay, so the first character is Jordan Baker. Now, she happens to be Daisy's best friend, and she comes from the same social class. So the first time we meet her, we actually see her description. So from page 11, it describes her as being a very slender, small framed woman. She has gray, sun stained eyes. And again, colors in this book have very symbolic connotations to them. It's interesting that they don't say blue, instead, it's gray. And gray generally symbolizes gloominess or sadness. Like, think a gray day, gray, rainy day. That's Jordan. There's an inherent sadness to her. She's not a very happy woman. And as the book goes on, you'll be able to make some guesses as to why. Now, Jordan is, as I mentioned, one of Daisy's best friends. Interesting, she actually knows of Tom's affair with Myrtle. She's the one that actually tells Nick of Tom's mistress and the fact that Tom has gotten an apartment in New York City so that he can meet Myrtle there. The only thing she seems to have a problem with is the fact that the mistress calls the Buchanan home during dinner time. So that's very ironic. She's not fazed by this mistress at all. She's just fazed by the fact that she's Myrtle. She is rude in the fact she called during dinner. So I think that says an awful lot about her and her morals in all of this. Now, Jordan is a professional golfer. You actually could probably refer to her as a flapper in this book. She's not the traditional woman. She is wealthy, she is old money, but she is very independent. So she is a professional golfer, and we will get into that in the book because there's actually a memory that Nick has that he will eventually remember in its entirety that deals with Jordan and the first time she was in a professional golf tournament. Nick seems to recall a less than pleasant story about her, but he can't quite remember all of it. That will come in the next couple of chapters. You'll actually see what it is. Her family in this book is only an elderly aunt, and she, like Daisy, is from Louisville, Kentucky. So down below, after I have Jordan, I have, like Daisy and Tom, she's going to drift from place to place without consequence or care. Again, she is old money. She was born into wealth. So she definitely has an air about her. And she does realize that with her money, she is able to get out of any problem she might encounter. And you'll see that particularly in the next couple of chapters. Jordan does represent the modern woman, and Daisy, her best friend, does represent the traditional woman. The two women are about a year apart in age. Jordan is slightly younger. Now, Myrtle Wilson is another character in this book, but she's very different than the characters we've met so far. So far, the characters we've talked about have been old money wealthy. That's not Myrtle. Myrtle actually is a middle class woman. She does not live in the same vicinity as the characters we've met so far. The previous characters, Nick rents a home in West Egg. The Buchanans, Jordan, they're in East Egg, right? And they do segregate themselves out by social class and old money versus new money. Myrtle is in what is called the Valley of Ashes. In reality, that's really Queens, New York, in New York City. Now, Myrtle's description, she's very different than the rest of the women in this book. She's in her middle 30s, which is significantly older, about 10 years older or more than the other women we've met so far. She's described as being faintly stout, but she carries her surplus flesh sensuously, as some women can be. And most importantly, her face contains no facet or gleam of beauty. She is very forgettable. There's nothing extraordinary about her. There's nothing about her that is beautiful. She's just very plain. In fact, her name of Myrtle actually has a symbolic meaning to it that we'll get to as the book unfolds. But Myrtle is very different physically than the other women are in the book, and she also is very different age-wise, social class-wise, and she does live in a different location too. Now, for Myrtle, colors do come into play with her as well. When we first meet Myrtle, she's actually wearing a dark colored clothing, dark colored dress. And she changes once she gets to the apartment that Tom has rented for them. She changes into a cream colored chiffon dress. The chiffon material is a light, billowy type of material. With the change in clothes comes a change in personality. In this book, the characters themselves, they wear certain colors of clothing to indicate their social class. If you are a wealthy person, you will be wearing lighter colored clothing because you're not really working. For example, you would wear white, light yellow, light blue, something like that, because you're not cooking, you have a chef. You're not doing your lawn, you have a gardener. You don't even have to raise your children. You might have nannies. So you can afford to wear clothing that is light colored. You don't have to worry about getting dirty because you're not really doing much. Middle class, however, they wear darker colored clothing, and that's because they work for a living. Myrtle is married. Her husband, George, who we'll meet a little bit later, George is a mechanic. So very dirty, dusty job. So when you first meet Myrtle, she's dressed appropriately for the location she's at and for what her husband does, what they do for a living. When she goes with Tom, she's Tom's mistress, she wants to play the role of someone wealthy. She knows a wealthier woman would be wearing lighter clothing. And her goal, her dream, is to marry Tom. So she changes into a lighter colored outfit to reflect what she hopes to be, which is wealthy. Now, she's married to George Wilson, and interesting in the story that she tells during this party, she actually married George because she thought he was a gentleman. She actually thought he had money. Now, she admits she's never been crazy about him. They've lived above his garage for 11 years. And she believes she's better than George. She deserves better than what George can give her. I guess you could say she's a gold digger in a lot of respects because she married George thinking that George had money when he actually did not. He's middle class. Now, by no means is George poor. He owns his own business. It's an honest living, but that's not the living that Myrtle wants. Hence, in having her affair with Tom, she subjects herself to a lot of abuse and continues with a lot of abuse because she's hoping that Tom will marry her. That will never happen. However, you saw towards the end of chapter 2, Myrtle has gotten drunk, and she is taunting Tom by saying Daisy's name. And Tom breaks her nose as a result. He will not be taunted by a woman who, in Tom's mind, is clearly beneath him. Unfortunately for Myrtle, she seems to accept this abuse and she does not end the relationship because she truly does believe that she will marry him. In fact, there's a lie at one point that said that the only reason why Tom has not left Daisy is because Daisy is Catholic and does not believe in divorce. Nick, being Daisy's cousin, absolutely knows that's a lie, that Daisy is not Catholic, that this has nothing to do with divorce. So Myrtle hopes really in having this affair that she will escape her social class. That is generally how women could actually move social classes, is through marriage. And she feels that if she marries Tom, she would get to the highest social class. This dream actually is never going to come true. Myrtle is a diversion in Tom's life. Myrtle is not the first affair that Tom has had, nor probably will it be the last that he has. Friends of Tom are very appalled by this affair, not because of the affair itself, but because Tom is actually taking Myrtle out in public in New York City. They're not out in public in Long Island. That you don't mix that situation, marriage and affair. But in New York City, his friends see him with her and they find it appalling that he would actually flaunt Myrtle. These affairs, although they exist, they should be kept behind closed doors. But Tom, thinking that he can do whatever he wants, will take Myrtle out. So the last character is actually Jay Gatsby from the book. Now, you don't really see him. You see him from a distance, but there's no interaction with him yet. You will actually see him in the next 2 chapters. So the introduction of Gatsby, the first time we actually see him is from a distance. Nick actually sees him because Nick lives next door to him. Nick lives in West Egg. He is renting, and that is where Gatsby is. Gatsby, ironically, lives directly across the bay from the Buchanans, intentionally has bought a home there. And Nick sees Gatsby on his dock staring at this green light across the bay. And that's very symbolic. This green light, the house that it belongs to, represents what Gatsby hopes to have, which is Daisy. He's hoping to reunite with Daisy. He's hoping to restart their love affair. And so for right now with Gatsby, because he's a relatively new guy in town, there's lots and lots of rumors that are going on around him as to how he's made his money, because this man has a lot of money. And people so far, what the rumors are is that he either is the nephew or the cousin of Kaiser Wilhelm, who was the German emperor at the time. But they seem to have scandalous connotations to them. Now, we will go over when we get further into the book. There's lots of rumors about Gatsby. Some of the rumors, Gatsby actually has floated out into town, and he does that on purpose. But for right now, I will tell you that he is not the cousin or nephew to the German emperor. He has no relationship with him at all, or with his family for that matter. So that's a false rumor. But that's out there for a reason. And we'll see about that as the book goes on. For Gatsby, who he is and where he lives, he's going to try to portray himself as something that he truly is not. It should be noted that West Egg, East Egg, they are across the bay from each other. East Egg is where all the old money people live. West Egg is where all the new money people live. So Gatsby is in the appropriate town. Nick is not. Nick is old money. He actually should be across the bay, but he was just renting, so didn't own a house. Gatsby's going to try to portray himself as old money, and he will do that for purposes of impressing Daisy. He is not, however. And as the book goes on, you'll see who he truly is. All right, so those are the notes for chapters 1 and 2. Again, make sure that you have these in your notebook. So you should be writing these things down as I go over them.